Howdy, y'all, and welcome back to another riveting episode of the Sanctified Podcast. Hold on to your bootstraps, because today we're going to explore Saint Olaf Haraldsson, also called Holy Olaf or Olaf Digre in his own time, which Digre would translate to Olaf the Fat or Olaf the Heavy Built. Olaf Haraldsson was born in 995 in Norway. And yeah, I know it's pretty nice that we know the upbringing of a saint for a change, right? Haven't had that for a little bit. His father, Harald Grensk, died before Olaf was born, and so Olaf was raised by his mother, Asta Gudbrandsdottir, and eventually his stepfather, Sigurd Syr. Olaf was said to have been about average height, but he was particularly broad, and was said to have had eyes that were very beautiful and piercing in such a way that, if he got angry, he'd be pretty scary to look at. He was also adept in various fighting methods and in physical activities. He was skilled with a bow and particularly skilled with throwing spears. He was a great swimmer, and he even had a pretty good knowledge of smith work. He was also said to have been a very gifted speaker. And I know he's starting to sound like a movie character or something with all of these talents, but just wait, there's more. He was apparently very respected and loved by those around him. So the people who were close to him would gladly help him in any of his endeavors. Now, you might be thinking, these don't really sound like ideal qualities for a saint, or at least not all of them do. And maybe he sounds a little more like a warrior than a saint. Well, he was a warrior. He was a Viking warrior, in fact. And when he was young, he was raised to be a pagan, which kind of explains his upbringing and focus on fighting and physical skills. But he did change his faith at a fairly young age in his young teens, so we'll get into that shortly. When Olaf was just 12, he started going on Viking raids in Europe. He sailed to an island in the Baltic Sea, and from there he left to participate in the Siege of Canterbury. But it's not quite what you think. He actually fought to help England and drive out the Danes who were fighting to overtake the land. Interestingly, this period coincides with the Netflix series The Lost Kingdom. Now, I haven't watched it, but if you've watched it, you might have a better idea of kind of what was going on in Olaf's time in that area of the world. It is also very likely that Olaf helped restore the throne to King Ethelred, aka Ethelred the Unready, but it's not 100% a proven fact. And after his adventures in England, Olaf unknowingly took his first steps towards becoming a Christian. He wanted to return to his homeland of Norway, but he didn't like how divided the nation was at the time. And he wanted to unite the people of Norway like his ancestor Harald Fairhair did. But he wasn't really sure, so he set out from England to spend the winter of around 1013, 1014 in Normandy before he would actually go home to Norway. Olaf shared a similar heritage with the Normans at this time, but the biggest difference between them was that the Normans were already Christians, while Olaf was Norse pagan. Throughout the winter, Olaf spent a lot of time with Richard II, and he noticed a lot that he liked about the Christian faith. In fact, he began seeing ways that it could unite his homeland that was tearing itself apart from within. It was then that Olaf made the decision and requested to be baptized. Olaf was baptized by the Bishop of Normandy, and as the warmer weather approached, Olaf set sail again for England, but this time he was going to help King Ethelred II recapture London from the Danes. It is said that these battles destroyed the London Bridge and are likely the source of the nursery rhyme we all probably know, London Bridge is falling down. After helping the king, Olaf finally returned to Norway, and he began his long and hard battle to unify the country and rebuild it from the damage it had sustained. I'll do my best to keep this from being a big history lesson, but I want to be sure to cover enough info so you have a good idea of Olaf's struggles and challenges as he attempted to unify Norway and the kind of results of his efforts. Olaf began by taking Earl Eric of Lade as prisoner, not the most Christian thing I know, and then he took over his position and he was essentially a minor king of Norway. He had his foot in the door now. His overreach spread out as much of this part of Norway had already been introduced to Christianity or to Catholicism at this time, and there pretty willing to follow a ruler who held those beliefs. It wasn't totally new and a totally different lifestyle for them. Now, yes, he did still have battles against people who didn't agree. It wasn't all rainbows and butterflies, but it wasn't incredibly challenging either. Eventually, Olaf found himself accepted as King of Norway by villages all around the country, but not all of the villages. The coastal villages didn't quite join right away, but Christian missionaries had been there multiple times, so it didn't take long for them to be convinced to join Olaf. The big issue was northern Norway. They held out for a little bit longer, and he had to come up with a way to change that, to get them to change their ways and join him. So what did Olaf do? He decided that he needed to ban the sale of corn to northern Norway in 1023. And no corn means no beer. Yeah, Vikings without beer. I think we can imagine how thrilled they were about that. Obviously, there was smuggling that ensued, but there's one story in particular I want to share because it's a little funny and ironic, and it also leads to Olaf's demise as ruler of Norway. So the story goes there was a smuggler going back and forth, and he did have some connections. We'll get into that shortly. But he was captured and he was sentenced to death by King Olaf. But he was captured during Easter. In fact, it was on Good Friday. And Olaf said that there could be no executions because it was Easter, so they had to wait to kill him until Easter was over. Like, is it right to kill the guy? I don't know. But I mean, I guess at least Olaf knew where he drew the line. He wasn't going to do it during Easter. Now, like I said, there's a lot more to that. So if you want to get more of the details, you can probably look up something online along the lines of Asbjorn smuggles corn captured by King Olaf. The smuggler was from Sweden, and the port that he went to had previously been immune to pretty much all restrictions as long as they paid some sort of fee. Like, even enemies of the area could use the port as long as they paid a fee to use it. So he probably just figured that it was safe to use still. Like, it had been safe in the past. There's these new rules, but they never cared about those rules in the past, so let's just go ahead and use it. But Olaf decided to mix things up. Anywho, the smuggler's uncle just so happened to be Erling Skjalsson, who was a pretty powerful man in Sweden. And when he learned that his nephew was captured and sentenced to death, he sent 1,500 men to rescue his nephew. Olaf then agreed to release the young man because it's a lot of people to send to rescue the kid, and Olaf didn't want to start a war if he could avoid it. But he released him on the condition that the young man would work as the farm manager. Well, he didn't. And citizens of both regions weren't very happy about the whole ideal anyways. So it was just, the water was starting to boil over in here, and eventually men loyal to King Olaf killed Erling Skjalsson, and that just made everything a million times worse. That triggered Knut to invade Norway and force Olaf to flee in 1028. But he returned in 1030 to attempt to regain his power. Well, that wasn't his best idea. That triggered the Battle of Stiklestad on July 29th, 1030, and that is when Olaf was killed. But immediately after Olaf died, there was an eclipse. That's pretty crazy timing, isn't it? And then somehow some of his blood was put into a blind man's eyes, and the blind man, his sight was restored. I'm not sure if it was like right after Olaf died, but obviously it couldn't have been too long after he died because your blood only lasts so long after you die. But that's not all. Olaf appeared to be an incorruptible, which means his body didn't decay. His body was exhumed after a year, and it is said that it was not only just totally normal, but it looked like his hair, his beard, and his nails had grown while he had been dead. He was given the name Olaf the Holy upon this discovery, and he got this name before he was even canonized, and his grave became a site of pilgrimage. In 1250, King Hakon, sorry, it's a little bit of a mouthful. King Hakon Hekkinson built a church and consecrated it to Olaf, and that too became a point to stop at in the pilgrimage to Saint Olaf. Another point of the pilgrimage is Saint Olaf's Well. The legend of the formation of the well is pretty crazy and kind of cool, honestly. So Thor was mad that Olaf had built a church, and so Thor threw his hammer to destroy the church. He wanted, if you watch Marvel, if you know Norse mythology, the hammer's name is Mjolnir, and it's pretty destructive. Well, Olaf used his power, whether divine or physical, and it was stronger, and it redirected the hammer. Now, I tend to lean towards a more divine power in this story because no normal dude is going to be able to change Mjolnir's path. Like, you need some sort of special power to do that. And again, if you've seen Marvel, you kind of understand the point. And where the hammer landed, it created a crater, and a natural well has been there ever since. Now, there are other wells attributed to Saint Olaf around Norway, and they are all places of pilgrimage, and people who visit them pray for healing and good fortune. But this was just the most prominent well for Saint Olaf. Olaf's investigation into beatification and canonization began immediately after his death because of the eclipse. People were like, whoa, that's pretty crazy. There's got to be some sort of divine power here. And he was canonized by Pope Alexander in 1164, just 34 years after his death. He was enshrined in 3 jeweled cases inside Nidaros Cathedral, but that was destroyed in the Reformation, and his body has been lost since. He's held in great respect by Norway, and the Royal Norwegian Order of St. Olaf is the highest honor that a civilian in Norway can receive. He's the patron saint of Norway and of the Faroe Islands, as well as carvers and for those in difficult marriages. His feast day is July 29th, the day he died, as is the common theme for saints. And that wraps up Saint Olaf Haraldsson. As always, I encourage discussion about this interesting man. I know he wasn't the most, I'll just say polite saint that we've covered, but he's a saint nonetheless, and he's a very interesting story. I don't think I've really covered any who have been as aggressive, let's say, throughout their lives. A lot of times they were aggressive and then they find faith and then they're like mellowed out. Like, no, Harold, the way he was raised, he kind of just stuck with that, and he just kept using what he knew to expand what he thought would be best for his people. But what are your thoughts on Saint Olaf? Do you like him? Do you not like him? Let me know in the comments. And if you have a saint you'd like me to check out, feel free to email me at sanctifiedpodcast@proton.me or leave a comment. I will try to stay on top of reading those. Sometimes I forget to check that stuff. But if you want to support, you can always leave a like, subscribe. Commenting obviously is helpful too, because not only does it get the show more promotion, but it helps me figure out what you guys like to hear about, what kind of saints you want me to cover. I hope you found Olaf's story as interesting as I did, and I hope that you have a wonderful day.